Hey PC gamers, and welcome back to the PC Gamer Chat Log. I am Lauren Morton and I'm here with Molly.
Hey, how's it going?
And this week we're going to be talking with Tyler Wilde, who is our executive editor on the US side. And we're going to be discussing E3, which, as we know at this point, has been canceled again for this year. There is no E3 2023.
Maybe it's dead for good. Maybe this is the last we will ever hear of E3, which will be sad, but hopefully not. But that's what we talk about. Yeah.
But yeah, it does sort of feel they're in an even deeper hole to climb out of than 2020. You know, obviously everything was canceled in 2020. It wasn't terribly surprising, and they tried to make a comeback over the next couple years, basically, and
it's not gone well.
it's not gone well. It ended up canceled. So we brought in Tyler because Tyler has been on the press side of the industry much longer than Molly and I. So Tyler has been to E3 quite a few times, and he had lots of fun memories to share about actually being there, what it was like to cover it, the differences between what the show used to be like in the mid 2010s versus now. So that'll be a fun conversation. And before that, Molly, what did you do last week?
Yeah. So once again, not a lot. I feel like I'm saying this an awful lot lately. But I went to the arcade. So I'm back on the arcade grind. I think I've mentioned on this podcast before that I really love rhythm games, arcade rhythm games. So because it was a holiday in the UK, so I spent a little bit of my time in the arcades, grinding out some My My, some Dance Dance Revolution, and also, Lauren, you'll be happy to know that I also bought Young Ladies Don't Play Fighting Game. So for anyone who was listening or watching last week, Lauren recommended a manga called Young Ladies Don't Play Fighting Games to me because I am a young lady and I do play fighting games. So do these young ladies.
They do. They're very serious about it.
They're very, very serious about it. So I went and bought the first 4 volumes, which I think is all there is. I think that's all there is right now. I think there's a 5th one, but it hasn't been translated yet. So yeah, I'm like nearly finished with the first volume, which I've bookmarked with a Subway napkin.
Classic.
Not sponsored, I guess. There are there are other sandwich shops. But yeah, no, I'm really enjoying it. It's so goofy. I love there's like this panel where she like wins the first game super easy and she's like, holy crap, she sucks.
Yes.
And I'm like, that's me. But no, I love it.
So serious, and then all of a sudden they play, and she's like, "Oh my god, she's terrible."
And I love it so much. I'm really enjoying it so far. I love that there's like queer baiting from like the second panel. Like immediately, it's like, yeah, there's a little, WLW in here, but I'm loving it. I'm really enjoying it already. So thank you for the recommendation.
You're welcome. I'm so glad you're having fun with it.
Yeah, I had to like look in quite a few different comic book shops to actually find the first volume for some reason. Yes, I'm very happy. So that's my sort of gaming week. And my usual Tekken 7 bullshit, of course. What about you, Lauren? What have you been up to this week?
Okay, we're very in sync again.
Oh, really?
Yes. So I can't talk about what I've been playing over this past weekend. The review for what I've been playing will be up the day after this podcast gets posted, so you'll get to hear about it after that, but I can't talk about it now. But I have a book-related piece of information for you again, because it's not manga this time. But I recently learned, because I've been putting myself through sort of a project this year with my like fantasy fiction reading of trying to read like all of the former work of some of my favorite authors.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes you just try new stuff a lot and you get a little weary of taking other people's recommendations that you like, you're on social media and just everybody has different tastes than you. I was like, I should just go back and be reading a
Mhm.
lot of books by authors I already know I really enjoy.
Yeah.
And one of them is Rachel Aaron, who usually writes like these modern fantasy dragons in the US West, sort of. Anyway,
Oh.
she's also written with her husband, like they collaborated on a series, a trilogy called Forever Fantasy Online, which, as you might guess, is basically uh like isekai VR MMO anime, but a novel, right?
Ooh, okay.
And I don't know anything about it. I haven't even started reading it yet, but because that's on my list of things I should read this year, I've learned that lit RPGs, LIT, literary RPGs, are like a genre more so than I
Really?
even knew of already. Like there are, other than Ready Player One. I know Ready Player One exists. I haven't read it. I'm not going to read it. I'm sorry. But this genre existed before Ready Player One. Other people writing things that were like reference stats, skill points, levels, things like that in the form of like a fantasy novel. So I don't bring you a recommendation so much as just I learned an interesting fact. There's a lot more lit RPGs than I knew about. So
That is very interesting. I might have to check that out actually. I'm trying to do more reading again, even if it is just manga, cuz
Mhm.
I got to stop playing video games all the time, man. I
How
know
can you
we're
say
on a
that?
I know we're on a gaming podcast for a gaming website talking about video games, but man, I gotta stop playing so many video games. I gotta, I gotta go touch grass some more.
You have to broaden your horizons, Molly. Take more creative inputs. It's good for you.
Yeah, exactly. And somehow end up linking it all back to video games
Mhm.
anyway. So, but no, that's really interesting actually. I will have to check that out between all the techning and also playing some of the game that you
That I'm
can't
not
talk about
talking
right
about
now.
yet. Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe later this year I'll
Maybe
come back around with some real recommendations for lit RPGs that I've actually
oh,
gotten to read. But if anybody else is well versed in the genre, I'm always curious about book recommendations. So
yes. Please drop some recommendations. That'd be great actually. Fuck video games. What are your book recommendations, people? Please
I've
tell
successfully
us.
turned this into a book podcast. Yes.
Amazing. But no, so that's what we've been up to this week. We've had we've had a good week, I would say, both of us.
Yeah, I
Apart
think so.
from, yeah, apart from some things, but it's been a good week.
We'll get to that next week. We'll get to talking
Yeah,
about
we'll
the things
probably
that we're
talk about it
excited
next
next
week,
week.
won't we?
Yeah, it'll be fresh Monday morning, and I'll be able to talk about it, and I'll have some things to say. So cool. Well, now we are off to talk to Tyler about E3. Bye.
Bye.
All right, so we are here with Tyler Wilde. Mr. Wilde, would you like to explain who you are and why you are the person we've brought in to talk about the lengthy history of E3, how much E3 you have under your belt?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I've been at PC Gamer since 2011, so that's over a decade. But then I was working on another website before that, and I started doing this in 2006. I don't think I went to E3 in 2006, but I think I did in 2007, would probably be the first one that I went to. So it's been a while. I haven't been to one in since we started the PC gaming show, but I can reminisce about older E3s, which is
And
the topic that you haven't introduced yet. But
yeah, we found out as of recording, this was last week. As of posting, it'll be a couple weeks back. We found out that E3 is canceled again this year. And in recent history, I think it was 2020 that it was canceled the first time completely due to the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
And then it was what,
Hmm.
online only, I think in 2021 is what happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then last year got canceled again. And it's been around for a very long time, as Tyler is pointing out, and we're trying to figure out how we feel about that. If we're glad to see it go at last, I think when it got canceled in 2020 and then came back in that online format in 21, I think there was probably a lot of speculation about whether that would hold, whether it was going to, actually come and stick back around, grasping at that like online format. Because I think this year it was supposed to be both, right? Online and in person. And yeah, didn't make it.
Yeah, this year was supposed to be the big comeback, the big, in person return of E3, taking over the LA Convention Center again. And until pretty recently, they were saying, yeah, full steam ahead. Like in February, there was a quote from the company that was organizing it for the ESA. And so when it all fell apart, when we got news that it wasn't happening at all, at that point, it felt like the ship sinking, right? I think people feel like maybe this is it, and there's no more E3 after this. Like they tried, and you understand in 2020, of course, it was canceled because of the pandemic, and in 2022, last year, like it makes sense that it would be tough to bring it back, but this is the third time in 4 years, so
yeah, that it's kind of struggled. I think before we do get into anything as well, it's definitely worth mentioning that our own show, the PC gaming show, the one that we traditionally do at E3, is still happening. It's still going ahead, as far as I'm aware.
it is.
Yep, that is still happening. As is our sister site, Games Radar, their future game show, their summer showcase that they usually do. That is also going ahead. E3 or no E3, we're still in the game. We're still doing it. But unfortunately, just not with E3's sort of backing, right?
Yeah, and that's sort of what happened to E3 at this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that exact reality. We're doing it without E3 is what everybody simultaneously decided after 2020, right? Sony
Right,
started
yeah.
doing their own direct to consumer on streaming platforms, State of Plays, Microsoft, Bethesda, Ubisoft, everyone is doing their own thing, and I'm sure finding that it's cheaper to produce a video, no matter how much time and effort it takes to produce that video, than to fly equipment, demos, all this stuff, line it up with the timeline of E3. And yeah, probably finding out that making their own rules and timelines is actually better than scheduling around the summer, potentially.
And even before 2020, there would be instances where a big company would be like, yeah, well, we're not doing E3, but we're doing a big press conference like on the weekend before E3, but we're not on the show floor. So people were already making their own way in LA in June for, June video game announcement week, non-denominational. So, E3 was already, people were already questioning its relevance, right, before 2020.
Yeah.
But then the pandemic, like it did with so many things, if there was a weak spot in anything, right, it crumbled. And I think that's what happened to E3. And of course, Jeff Keighley was right there with Summer Game Fest, which I think we'll talk about later.
Ready.
Yeah, definitely. That's part of what I wanted to ask, was sort of the history that we all have with it, because Tyler, like you mentioned, of course, your history as press is a lot longer than Mollie and I's. I think for the two of us, we've mostly experienced E3 as consumers, she and I. And Tyler has a lot of time spent being part of E3 as press. Tyler, do you have? I read through Rich Stanton's memories of E3 that he published on the site last week as these announcement came up, and there was some cool stuff in there. Memories about like Miyamoto wandering the show floor, and so like with like a following behind him, and it like
you would definitely see stuff like that. I remember, I remember. I'm pretty sure I saw Snoop Dogg once. Because people would just come, like celebrities would just come. It's in LA, they'd get invited, right? Or maybe he was there promoting something, I don't know. But you would see people like Miyamoto, and it was impossible to miss Reggie Fils-Aimé from Nintendo as well, walking through the show. So that's cool. Like you did get to meet a lot of people. It was an interesting event for me. But it was, a lot of running around and doing appointments and, writing stuff up as fast as you could. or shooting video interviews sometimes very awkwardly. I had no experience doing that. So it was, yeah, I think people have talked about it as a place where, you know, young new games media would cut their teeth in a way that was challenging and exciting and fun. And it could be all those things. It could also be exhausting and frustrating. You know, you were really like running between appointments, and then it was also a place I think people went to just to be seen. You know, the whole industry coming together. There was like, you know, it's a social event too. A lot of partying. I don't know how it's been like in recent years because I haven't gone. But that's my memories from like the 2000s mostly. And you know, going to the press conferences was like interesting, but over time, it's become so much easier to cover most of E3 from home. You know, that's why I've not been going since like 2016 or so, because everything's, you know, live streamed, of course, and that really changed everything. You know, when I first started covering it, if it was 2007 or so, like, you know, when's YouTube? I mean, YouTube was like new at that point.
Yeah.
It's
I mean, it got
before
really
YouTube.
big around like 04 or 05 or something like that,
Yeah,
right?
it's about 04.
So like, yeah, it was launched in 2005. So like, YouTube's only a few years old.
Mm-hmm.
People don't have good internet connections. Like the first site I worked at, we had like real player videos. That's how we showed people
Oh my
videos, and like
goodness.
they
Yeah.
didn't load properly. So like you couldn't just watch, you know, an hour of gameplay footage of something you were interested in, and like every developer didn't have a blog where they talked about like every decision they were making with Diablo 4 or whatever.
Right.
You just didn't have all that information. So like a lot of what we were doing is like running around, going to game previews, and then just like describing what the game was in an article, you know, like it was less sophisticated in a lot of ways. I mean, the like business of reporting on games now, you know, not that there weren't people doing more sophisticated work then, that there definitely were, but now like the floor has risen on like the games media and then what we do, you know, and like the quality of the interviews we do, or not the quality, but like the purpose of them, because
Yeah.
it made sense that we were like describing games to people because that was the
That's
only
how they
way
were
they
going to
could find
find
out.
out.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, even if you are going to watch a video, it's like 360p, like it looks bad. So like if you had to just like describe the graphics of the game, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
otherwise people could just see like blurry screenshots of it. So that was you can sort of see why the floor show part of E3 became less and less a big deal, except for, you know, the other aspects of it. It's not just about press, right? It's about the business and you know, that side of it coming together. But for press, it's like the last big hands-on E3 demo I can remember was the Cyberpunk one. And as we all know, the game didn't really turn out to be representative of the game that we ultimately reviewed, I think. And that was like a huge criticism of E3 as an event, right? Is like developers spend all this time preparing these perfect vertical slice demos for press, and then we play them, we write about them, and then later it's a different story when the game comes out. So it was certainly flawed, but I just don't think now, like the biggest game upcoming, I guess, is like Starfield.
Yeah.
And like if we were to get like a hands-on demo at E3, like it would be a big deal when we would take that opportunity to tell people how Starfield plays, like, you know, at the drop of a hat. But that used to be like the biggest thing in the world, is like the first hands-on of some big new game. But now I think, I mean, what would the other? It would be like, well, the combat is kind of like this,
It's
and
kind of
you
like
know,
Fallout 4. And
there's yeah, like I'm not saying Starfield isn't exciting or interesting. Just it there used
the
to be
things that
so
are
much
exciting
more
about it are different.
surprise. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. The I mean, games have gotten more sophisticated too. Like it just telling someone that the graphics were really cool in a game, it just used to be a bigger deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Before we
Not
get
expected.
Before we get to like what Molly and I remember from E3 in our shorter experience, this is actually the perfect moment to pull out. I went and dug around because I don't have many magazines hanging around my place, but I did dig out some '05 and '03. This is Game Informer of
Oh damn.
Game Informer of '05.
nice.
And they were talking about Oblivion. There's a whole E3 blowout where they've got previews. And like you're saying, Tyler, I looked through some of these, and most of what's being written about is just directly reporting like the mood of the press conference itself, how people were reacting to it because consumers were not there, and just directly describing like, this is what the upcoming game is. It's part of this series. This is who's making it. This is the kind of vague thing it's going to be. And those are the kind of things that
Yeah.
are, like you said, just on a developer's website. You don't need the magazine to tell you that
Mhm.
And
anymore.
gamers are so much more sophisticated now too, right? Like they know what to expect from games. Like you got to tell them something surprising, you know. 'Cause, yeah, of course there are people who want to read and or wanted to read every single detail about Elden Ring, you know, that there was. Um, but you know, I think generally, yeah, we take like more specific angles now when we cover something than here's what the plot of the game is and what the main character looks like and here's what skills there are. You know, we still do that stuff, especially you know from a guide's perspective, but I think it's different. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. Yeah. How many?
Molly,
How many? I was gonna say, how many E3s have you worked as press, Lauren?
as press,
Yeah.
what I've been writing for PC Gamer on a freelance basis since like 2017, but I feel like the first time I was really part of E3 as press, I mean, it's only been a few years. Probably like the first time I really remember writing news was probably in 2020, the year that it was canceled,
Yeah.
for about, Jeff Keighley's Summer Game Fest and not even about E3. I was probably only marginally involved in PC Gamer's coverage in 2019, the year before that. So yeah,
Yeah.
I most of my E3 memories are all just being a player and a consumer.
Pretty much me too, right? My only E3 worked as, in the industry was the 2021 online one, right? Everything else.
Mm-hmm.
I started this job in late 2020, right after Cyberpunk came out. Pretty
Mm-hmm.
much I started this job. So so my only experience with E3 on this side of things was the digital only 2021 event. But yeah, so pretty much the rest of my time has been spent as a consumer, right? As somebody who watches these to see what's going to happen, not to write about it, just purely for my own excitement. And yeah, like I always enjoyed it. I always really liked E3. I have like very fond memories of, especially like when I was at university, the 2019 one in particular, sort of huddling in my little university living room with like the TV, and all of us were like tucked on this little like sofa together, seeing what there was like. And because we were all waiting for Animal Crossing, if I remember correctly. That was the main thing that we were waiting for. But I just have really fond memories of it as a consumer. Yeah, what about you? What do you think about sort of E3 as on the gamer side, I guess, Lauren?
I'll admit that I sort of had gaming magazines growing up, and I definitely flipped through. I think I was mostly interested in like the fan art that they would put in the magazines as much as the announcements themselves as a kid. So my even as a consumer, I feel like I didn't really have active memories of E3 until I was quite a bit older, like in university and even out of university. The biggest
Mhm.
memory that I have of E3 is 2015. A friend and I were co streaming on Twitch. Twitch was still not what it is now, it was already getting pretty big. But anyway, you could watch different E3 showcases live on YouTube and Twitch and whatever, and also be providing your own commentary through your live stream. So I was doing that together with a friend, and I remember seeing the first Dark Souls 3 trailer announcement during like Microsoft showcase and being very excited. And that was the year that Fallout 4 got announced, and they did the whole big like they hadn't announced the next Fallout game, but here is Todd Howard coming out and showing you the character creator, like the first moments of the game, and like a bunch of concept art. And then they were like, oh, by the way, also here's Fallout Shelter. You can play it right now. I'm a Fallout Shelter defender. I actually enjoy that mobile game. And by the way, Fallout 4 is coming in just a few months. It's coming out in November, and it's June right now. So that's sort of the memories I have, are the more recent ones where it was already starting to become really accessible to consumers, as like being live streamed, being shown, and you did have a way to access that information that wasn't waiting for your Game Informer or PC Gamer or whatever magazine to show up and tell you what happened at E3.
I think it's the same for me. Like the early 2010s, like the early to mid 2010s are where most of my like memories of really enjoying E3 came from, you know, like being able to easily watch it. Like I'm pretty sure I watched it on like my Xbox at one point. I watched it on my phone. You know, I remember being on the bus home from work in 2013 using like, you didn't get a lot of mobile data back in like 2013, right? It was using like my last little snippet of data to watch the Xbox showcase and them announcing the new Killer Instinct game, which I think was the first Killer Instinct game in like 17 years. It was something wild like that. And Killer Instinct Gold on the Nintendo 64 was my first fighting game. And I just remember that excitement of something just totally unexpected, like coming out of this showcase. And I remember like having a little like a little wobble, like a very meek, like I'm on public transport, but I'm very excited, like noise slipping.
And if anyone had asked you, you know, what you were reacting to, you would have had to say, well, there's so there's a series called Killer Instinct.
So do you know anything about video games?
Yeah, so that was just that, like that little excitement and being able to share that excitement with everyone at the same time, I guess. And that was something that I really, really enjoyed, especially, you know, from those shows, like when you said, Lauren, when they were becoming more accessible to consumers and more readily available in the moment, right?
Mm-hmm. Even before people could go.
Yeah, something some of my one of my old friends used to talk about a lot is the lack of like shared cultural experiences these days, compared to when like TV was like whatever was on. Everyone was watching the same thing at the same time, right? You know, everyone's doing their own thing, you know, that they're watching their own live streams or they're in their own Discords and watching, you know, maybe the same TV shows. Maybe everyone's watching Succession or whatever, but they're not watching it at the same time, you know, and talking about it immediately. So there are like a few things that where everyone came together to watch at the same time, like the Super Bowl, at least in the US, you know, the Olympics, and like E3. And it was like fun for us, I think, to just experience that shared energy, right? Where it's like, you know, you and all your friends are reacting to these announcements at the same time and, you know, arguing over like who won the show or whatever. It's kind of this, you know, it's funny to make this big marketing event into like a horse race where we're, you know, getting behind, you know, our horses, I guess, but it's entertaining. It's fun. You know, I think a big part of the hobby of gaming for a lot of people is following the industry and enjoying sort of the surprise announcements or, you know, the hardware component was the biggest deal in the 2000s for the E3s I was going to. You know, it was like, what's Sony going to announce? What's Microsoft going to announce? And there were some rough years of like the motion control fad where it was like, it's Kinect and it's PlayStation Move, and we were just like, we don't want this. I mean, I think Nintendo, I remember the Nintendo conference where Miyamoto came out and introduced Wii Music.
Yes. Yes.
And it was, and this was like, you know, all these adult Nintendo fans, right, who had grown up with it and who didn't like the perception that Nintendo was like for kids, and like they're like, no man, Zelda's serious, just like in the audience, all groaning, these poor Nintendo loving people, But I think, Nintendo was vindicated completely by the Wii. Like, it was actually, genius and sold like crazy. And was great for like families. Like, they were right on. But E3 was full of, you know, gamer type people who were just like not having it. So it's pretty funny.
Yeah, that was
But
very
yeah.
funny. I really liked that Wii music. It's such a catastrophe in the most glorious possible way, right? I rewatched it today actually because I was thinking on these really like major moments of like just consoles, and you can really chart the trends like you said as well, like when everyone was into motion stuff, and there was that really awful Connect showcase as well that I recall, and I went and rewatched the Wii Music one, and it is just as bad as I remembered. It is, and I'm a Wii Music defender, and that was not a good
No.
presentation.
Well, that's part of what people love about E3, and I think people are lamenting they might not see anymore is that messiness, right? Like,
Yeah.
everyone comes out to LA, tries to put together a stage show with people who aren't professional presenters, like executives, game, directors, or maybe a celebrity comes and there's some weird thing happens there, maybe there was that one Bethesda
You're
conference, I think.
breathtaking.
Yeah. And there was that recent one that was just like a guy yelling woo constantly at the
Oh my
at the
god, that
Bethesda.
was, yes. Was that
It's like,
2021 or was that 2019? I
I thought
remember
it was recent, yeah, the woo guy.
I think it was 2019. I remember a friend of mine tweeting something along the lines of like Todd Howard has that man's family held hostage. Because he was just wooing everything, wasn't he? Oh my goodness. I completely forgotten about that. Yeah, that messiness is something that I'll miss. Like, was it Uncharted 4 where they couldn't get the controllers to work or something? It was a PlayStation 4 thing, if I remember.
Oh gosh,
And
yeah, live demos gone wrong is always a good category.
Yeah.
yeah, and it's not E3, it was PAX, but it's in the same vein of that like infamous Borderlands 3 presentation where I think they were having some technical difficulties and Randy Pitchford does magic tricks for like
Oh,
Oh, that's
8
right.
minutes. Something.
that's
Oh,
right.
gee.
They couldn't
It
get the
wasn't,
camera angles right, so you could sort of see what he was doing, and it was pretty.
and it was like like that kind of thing you don't get from anything else, right? And I know that wasn't E3, that was PAX East if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
But that sort of messiness, that sort of on the fly, just totally unexpected, like left field stuff, you just don't get anywhere else, and that's something that I really loved and appreciated about these live shows, right?
Yeah. So are those the real golden years of E3, where like not actually the earliest years, but the ones where we started to see things happening live? It wasn't being filtered through a magazine. You could watch it happen in the 2010s, and they
yeah. I
hadn't
mean,
gotten to the point where everything was so staged that there were no mistakes. Because now nobody does a gaming showcase with a live demo. The showcases we get now, there's no live demos.
yeah,
Even
they
Even
do
trailers.
the sort of like
yeah.
the Ubisoft multiplayer game demo that's pre-recorded with like people pretending to do
Yeah.
like banter, like they're in Discord together.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right, Lauren. Like, so the earliest one was like 95, and that
Yeah.
was Rich recounted that on the site with this just huge moment between Sega and Nintendo. Um, but that was stuff we like read about and we read previews. But yeah, there was that period of I don't know, like 2010 to like 2019 of live E3 shows streamed to everyone where things could go completely wrong and it would be funny and everyone could react, online at the same time on Twitter mostly, if I remember, like before
Yeah.
Discord.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, E3 was definitely like kind of messy right from the start. We just never got to see it all, right? Like you were saying about 95, about, the sort of Sega Nintendo situation, and then, was it the 95 one where I think it was the very first E3 where I forget who it was from Sony came on stage and all they said was 299. about the PlayStation,
Oh,
right?
yeah. I'm misremembering. I said Sega. I think, or no, I think it was Sony. Yeah,
Yeah,
that
Sony
was the
just
first one. Yeah,
they just came along and they just two. I think that was all they said was $2.99, and then walked off. And I love that like little messy drama like right from the start. What else did we had the how to lend a game to your friend on PlayStation 4 as well. That and it was
Yeah.
just the guy handing off the case to his friend, right? Because Microsoft were like doing all that awful DRM stuff at the time, if I remember correctly. And
Mhm.
I loved that messiness. I loved that little like the levels of petty drama were just so fun. The little jabs that they took at each other um is
and it
something that I
was.
kind of lived for it.
It always struck me as funny too. And yeah, you're right. It was Sega and Sony. It was the PlayStation at the first one, but yeah, that the ESA is the electronic. Wait, was it like what is it? Electronic something Entertainment Software Association. I don't know why I couldn't
Hmm.
remember that. Like that's the group that like all these companies are members of that put on E3, and so it was like it was just funny to have them come together under this banner that they all support. These companies all were basically supporting E3 to to snipe at each other in their press conferences. And like after that first one, the order of the press conferences became such a big deal. Like, oh, Sony's going after Microsoft, like they can
Yeah.
react, and like what are they going to do? It yeah, it was a lot of fun. I think, especially during like peak console war
Mhm.
years, which I really didn't have. I played console games, but I genuinely have been mostly a PC gamer. So I didn't really have a horse in that race. So it was kind of fun to watch from the outside, like people losing their minds over it. I think you mentioned, Molly, that the time when Microsoft came out and said, "Yeah, the next Xbox is going to be like always on online and stuff," and
Mhm.
Hmm.
it was like such a disaster, and it's like that's all we wanted to talk about, or people wanted to defend them, or it's sort of this crucible where all the current issues in gaming sort of get aired out, and people argue over them, which was which was a lot of fun for a while. And I think people who are kind of lamenting that it's gone are in some ways right that it's going to be a little bit more sanitized probably going forward. You're probably not going to see
Definitely.
that as much, but who knows? Maybe it'll still be messy.
Yeah. On
The
that
magic
messy
trick.
side, Tyler, do you actually remember much of this fateful Konami press conference
Oh yeah,
from
so
2010?
yeah, there was a Konami press conference in 2010 that I've seen people like, refer to it as the worst E3 conference ever, and I had this memory of being at it, um, and I thought like I started to wonder like was this just like a fever dream? Did I actually go to this, or did I just watch it and I just like misremembered? So I've been working at this company for way too long, so I went and looked at. I just searched my email for like Konami 2010, and sure enough, an email chain came up with a PR person of me, like an email inviting me to this press conference where they're like, space is very limited, so you must RSVP. And then me, of course, like RSVPing way late and being like, hey, is there still space? If so, I'll be there. And the PR person, gosh, they replied, hell yeah, for you guys, of course. And then I said, awesome, thanks, with a smiley face at the end. Not an emoji because we didn't have those really, but a colon and a parentheses. By the way, don't look at emails you've written from over a decade ago. You will be
Don't do
mortified
that.
by
Cringe.
the way you talk. Who the hell did I think I was anyway? So yeah, I went to this. It was in this little dark theater. It was, I mean, first of all, you can tell it's from 2010 because a guy comes out at the beginning and is like, okay, so if you have to leave, you need to quietly exit to the back because this is going to be streamed live on the internet. Okay.
Oh
And
my god.
so if you make noises, they will pick up. So it was just like very,
So
very,
threatening.
Welcome to the future.
yeah, it's sort of, this is the beginning of the end, but it was like an hour and 40 minutes.
Oh my
And
god.
there were just like they just like went through everything Konami's doing, and it was just like there was like a high school choir singing a song for a Glee game. If you remember the show Glee,
I've been
who
rewatching
could
Glee
forget it?
this week.
Yeah, you know what?
I
At the
actually started
time, I
rewatching
I
it.
watched the first season. I think I liked it.
It's not good. I can't
Yeah,
imagine what the game was like if the TV show is the way that
but
it
like
is.
it was such a weird just mashup of Konami stuff, Konami like licensed stuff, like uh, Russell Simmons, co-founder of Def Jam, was there. I can't. He was talking about a Def Jam game, but like what an amazing person to have there. And then there's like they had like a Mexican wrestling game, like a lucha libre game, and they had like this really awkward skit with like lucha libre guys like wrestling on the stage and like in this weird little theater. It
Oh
was
god.
it's one of those things where people called it like catastrophic at the time, right? And especially it's like live streamed to everyone, right? For the first time for like a lot of this stuff, but where you look back at it and go, actually, that was amazing. So glad I was there. Like, what a I didn't remember most of it. I had to go rewatch it to sort of. I think I blocked out a lot of it, but because the other part of E3 is also just like, yeah, like I said before, like people who aren't public presenters being public presenters. Like when I have to speak to everyone at a meeting, I feel a little bit nervous. I can't imagine if they put me on the stage of like the PC gaming show. Um, I don't know how people do it. I'm not a great public speaker, I don't think. So that they're taking just executives and, like I said, like game directors and people who don't speak English as a first language either, going out on stage and presenting in English. Like, I really applaud their guts. Especially, man, the internet is brutal now, but like, and I was totally a part of this to some degree, but like in the 2000s and like early 2010, like the idea of just being a snarky asshole on the internet was like, everyone had to get their dig in. If someone like messed up at a press conference on Twitter, everyone had to make their joke. Everyone had to like
That
make
was
the best
everyone's
joke.
personality for a
It
while.
was yeah, it was like a competition. Who can like be the meanest and like make fun of this in the most like snide way? And it must have been rough. I wouldn't want to go up on one of those stages, at E3 and then have like everyone on Twitter mock me for like flubbing a line, like even if it's not even a big thing, everyone would like still everyone will like react to anything that happens, which that's part of the shared experience and the fun. But I mean, rough. So I sort of remember fondly, like just watching people get up and and do their best to like try to get a crowd excited about, especially talking to like games journalists who are like, they want to talk about whatever Metroid Prime. They don't want to talk about like dance games, designed for a family sort of audience, right? Like, so they have to present all these games, to annoying games journalists who don't want to hear about them and only want to hear about the new Zelda. It's wasn't an easy job.
No, I can
So
imagine. Like, I think it was nice though because you kind of got that immediate gauge of what people thought off the bat, right? Like, another one because when I was just thinking about like the console wars, I guess. Ugh. When I was thinking about that and how they would do that at presentations, and I just remember like the utter silence when the PS3 price was announced. And I just remember like the room was dead silent. And then like this very awkward reveal of like Ridge Racer was also just, I think there was like one whoop or something. This was in the same presentation. And you could just get a feel straight away for what the vibe was for a certain game, right? if it was something exciting, everyone was cheering. And I think that changed a little bit as the years went on. I think especially 2018, 2019, I think there were a lot of enthusiastic people at times when they perhaps should have reserved that enthusiasm. That Bethesda showcase being a really good example. But I think especially back before that, it was such a good way to immediately get a feel on what people were thinking, right?
Yeah.
Press would admonish each other for clapping or like getting too into it. Like, there was this sort of debate in the 2000s, like, no, the games press needs to, be reserved and, be serious. And, of course, it wasn't only press in the crowds. It was all kinds of people invited from, business sectors, from, GameStop managers. But now there's definitely the crowd is like fans a lot of the time, right? At like these showcases, because they want that atmosphere. They want the atmosphere that, like, the press
Everybody loves everything.
didn't want to give them. Yeah. Which I think is fine. I mean, it's a live show, and it is kind of awkward when you're trying to play to a crowd that is sitting there silently, but
taking
you're
notes furiously.
But yeah, it was a common E3 trope, right? The pause for applause when there's no applause. And it's like, and it's not just because like it's press or whatever, because people were cheering and applauding for other stuff, and then they would pause for something and they would just hear a cough or something, and it was an amazing moment.
But we wouldn't have had that beautiful IGN meme if we didn't have audience reactions. I think it was IGN, right? The 4 journalists sitting down looking very like upset, and I think it was the 2004 Nintendo showcase.
Oh wow.
And then like a year later, the same 4 journalists are
right, I think reaction guys, if I'm finding the right image, is what people call them.
Is that what they're called? Just reaction guys?
I know,
that's the meme template.
Yeah, it was IGN reporters reacting to Nintendo's announcement of new titles at their E3 conference at 2003 and 2004. I'm just like stealing this from Know Your Meme, but I want to know the origin. I want to know what they were reacting to. It was
I think it was Metroid, right?
So the first one, the 2003, where they're sad, is introducing Pac-Man Versus for GameCube.
Can't believe that didn't go over well.
What Pac-Man Versus was, but apparently that was a game, a Pac-Man game, and then the next one was Zelda. Yeah, E3.
Oh, Zelda.
Of course, it was Zelda.
A great meme. One that we wouldn't have meme if it was not for E3, and also the Keanu meme as well.
Yeah,
we have like big Keanu, and then like a very squashed down version of Keanu on the stage next to him. I forget what that one's called. That's a good one as well.
E3 has given us so much.
E3 has blessed us in many ways. It has cursed us in so many more. But
it has blessed and cursed us. It's true.
And now for the future, we're going to have continued not E3s potentially in perpetuity. Yeah. We'll see what happens. But I mean, we know we're going to have Jeff Keighley's Summer Game Fest. We're going to have our own PC gaming show. There's, all of the biggest publishers, I'm sure, will announce their own showcases for sometime over the summer, as happened last year. So, I think even last year, we got several showcases in 1 week, if not like maybe across 2 weeks, because that first 2020, that first Summer Game Fest, when E3 was canceled, was very difficult. I remember being exhausted because it was Jeff Keighley's month long, and everybody else just staggered their presentations across like at least a month and a half. I mean, it was 6 weeks of what are we even going to see today? Like, what is this about? It was exhausting.
I really do hope. Yeah, I do hope they continue to do like a bunch of press conferences over 2 days.
We can call it whatever we want.
Yeah. Instead of like, well, Ubisoft's going to do it the first week of June, and then Sony's going to do it the third week of June, and because that's too much. I mean, it's those days are sort of fun where we're just going like back to back. I mean, they're tough days, right? Where we're going like back to back, like Microsoft and Bethesda conference, and then EA, and then Ubisoft, and then Sony or whatever. But it's sort of fun, and it's just like all in one day, and then we can digest it, afterward. So I hope that tradition continues to some degree.
Yeah. Me too. Me too. I don't want it to be too fragmented. I think it's definitely less pressure, I guess, on the developer and publisher side if it's like, hey, well, we don't have to do all our shit in like June or July anymore. We can just do our shit whatever month of the year. Like, great for them, not great for me. I much prefer kind of having, it's nice not only to have something to look forward to as as someone who loves games, right? Who loves gaming, who enjoys the hobby. It's nice to have something to look forward to, but on the work side of things, it's nice to know, okay, this is when all the chaos is going to happen, and then I don't have to think about it again.
It was fun as a viewer too to compare and contrast the different things. Like, oh, what did EA have? What did Ubisoft have? I don't know, having all that stuff, like missing stuff and going back and being like, oh, they announced that at that. I don't know. It's fun. It's entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, as you just beyond even our convenience as press, as work, obviously it's nice to have it compact for us. But like you were saying, Tyler, there's like a great feeling of everybody reacting to the same thing at the same time. And I think that's one of the things we risk losing the most is the I don't know the gravitas, I guess, is what I said earlier, of being so compact and so all at once. Like, it's a moment, it's an event that happens, and everybody's having their feelings about it simultaneously. And we were going to be at risk of losing that anyway, because like you said, people were already chipping away at E3, doing their showcases slightly earlier. And the way that social media is fragmented, everybody's reacting in different places even more than they ever were before. Is everybody talking about it on Twitter? Not necessarily. The way that it was for a few years. So.
It does let you feel like you're, part of something bigger, and like you're watching stuff that even maybe you don't care about personally. Like, I'm not going to play.
But you're at the event.
I would always watch like the Sony shows, even though I didn't have a PlayStation. I just wanted to see what they were doing, right? And like, I don't know, have an opinion on it or comment on it. I will miss that if that goes away. I think Jeff Keighley is, well, he's doing a few things, right? Because the Summer Game Fest like is its own live stream show, right? But then it's also kind of an umbrella term where he's like bringing, everything that sort of happens in that June period under that umbrella, even if it is like, quote, officially or unofficially associated. I think, if we can get, if they continue to do sort of this big announcement spree, that might be just where it lands. I know that like last year, Summer Game Fest did have a sort of physical event in LA. As I recall, it was like a big room with some demos. I know Street Fighter V was there, or 6. Sorry, wait, what are we on now? 6, yeah.
Yeah, 6 is the one that's coming out.
I'm losing track of Street Fighters. I'm getting old, but I don't think the like huge LA convention center giant booths. I mean, back when I was going, it was like, oh, I mean, aside from the conferences, you also had to compare like, oh, what does Nintendo's booth look like? What does Microsoft? Oh, Sony's booth is so small this year. Like, what does that mean? I don't know if that was ever true, but like that huge show floor presence that people would see like photos of, and I don't know, people like IGN or GameSpot would have like a huge booth in there where they're like, reporting live from E3. I don't know if that'll ever come back.
Nintendo Power 2003. They do at the very bottom. So this is Nintendo Power 2003. I was laughing earlier as I was looking through this to try and find stuff, because they did rag on Sony's booth. They said, check out that poor dark Sony booth. No one came, so they just shut down early. I don't know if that's true, if they're just shitting around, but it'll get blurry. You won't be able to see it. But there's definitely a picture of a PlayStation show floor booth in here. That
Yeah.
competitiveness.
I mean, that probably seems over, right? I don't see them doing that again, because that was always the news. It's like a company would announce, like, oh yeah, we're doing an E3 conference, but we're not going to be on the show floor this year, because that's just so much effort, right? I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't
Yeah.
think they just. I think they just didn't feel they were getting enough out of it.
Yeah.
Which is understandable. And I think people was sort of just getting tired of it by the end of it, right? Especially as publishers were dropping out. I think it was lessening in importance, and I think if this had happened, 7 years ago, I think people would be a lot more upset about it. But I think now there's just a lot more acceptance that, yeah, like if it comes back next year, great. Like I sincerely hope that they have the opportunity to take another shot at it, right? But I think right now, Summer Games Fest feels like the natural progression, I guess. It won't I don't think it'll ever have the same vibe or the same sort of flow as E3, but I think a lot of people, perhaps Keeley included, sees it as kind of the natural successor.
Yeah, I'm sure
I
he
mean,
certainly sees it that way.
I mean, after he did have a stage crashing incident at the Game Awards, and all the the sort of conversation about that, maybe he is acutely aware that a little bit of messiness is interesting. So I don't know. Maybe we'll
Yeah.
maybe we'll see him pushing to maintain the live element, but I don't think he can really exert much influence over the other, people putting on shows. I don't think E3 could. So I expect, yeah, lots of, Nintendo Direct style stuff. But I don't know. Ubisoft always used to like to go all out. Like they would have dancers and like people in costumes and stuff. Like their Just Dance like performances were always
It was
like
so good.
incredibly just, yeah. I don't know. Maybe they'll keep doing that. Although Ubisoft doesn't seem like a company that wants to be seen spending large amounts of money on opulent performances right now, given what we're hearing in their financial calls.
Yeah.
I hope
And that
we
was one of the
wind.
reasons. Yeah.
Yeah, that was financial commitments and extravagance and whatnot. I hope we find some sort of agnostic name for the summer period, the summer week or 2 weeks, like because Summer Game Fest isn't it, right? That if you're talking about console wars or publisher wars, I'm not convinced that Summer Game Fest, that Jeff Keighley is agnostic of the marketing umbrellas. He's just his own, right? So I do hope that we find some sort of name, term, week, I don't know, something that everybody independently comes back to.
Yeah. E3 was really a perfect, I mean, it was just a perfect name. It was like 2 syllables.
Yeah.
But I don't know what we call it now. Yeah. I mean, last year we called it not E3 because like we're like, well, people are still going to be searching for E3, right? Because not everyone's going to know it's canceled. But we can't call it E3 because it's not E3, so we'll call it not E3. I don't think we can keep doing that. Like at this point,
No,
like E3's dead, right? Like
it
we
needs
could
a
try to
real
keep
name.
going. We could just be like, we're just going to keep calling it E3. Sorry.
It, like you said, Tyler, all of the biggest publishers, the console developers, had to agree hand in hand to come to this thing every year, even if they were going to be like arm wrestling each other in the midst of it, right? It was like great the great truce week or something, right? Everybody shows up, even if it's going to be a lot of jostling. That's
Yeah. Like game. What is it?
That
Game.
vibe may not survive.
Yeah. GameIndustry.biz, which is owned by the company that was organizing E3 for the ESA. Their head, Christopher Dring, posted an editorial about why E3 didn't happen this year, why it was canceled. And he basically said, like, yeah, like the industry didn't want it. They have to want it for it to happen. They have to participate. There's nothing the organizer can do if Microsoft, Ubisoft, Sony, if they all say we don't want to do this. So will they ever, come together to create that crucible for themselves again? It's hard to see it happening, but nothing's impossible.
True. It would be nice.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is a shame because it did really feel like they were trying this year to come back in a big and in a meaningful way as well, right? I think it definitely felt like there was a really good effort there, and it's a shame that it's not happened. But there'll still be announcements, there'll still be drama, I'm sure, just not quite on the same scale that we used to see, I guess.
E3 is dead. Long live something new. Not named E3.
June video game week.
This
We'll
is when it
workshop
comes
that.
back next year, like by some miracle, and we're like, oh shit.
It's okay. Stuff you said on the internet is like gone as soon as you say it, right? It's not archived anywhere. No one will know.
Digital footprints are a myth.
That's right.
No one has to know how wrong we were this year. But it's okay. Now we all have summer something to look forward to. There will be many showcases. There will be our PC gaming show. There will be plenty of things to watch. And all we can hope for this year is that they are all scheduled in a way that doesn't make us so exhausted. I'm looking forward to it anyway. I want to see what happens.
Yeah, it'll be fun. We'll see more Starfield this June. I think they're doing like a separate Starfield thing. Although maybe it's
going to have to be
that's
sooner.
not in June. I don't remember, but no, that is in June. Yeah.
Oh, is it? Yeah. June's going to be busy, even without
Sure
it.
is. Yeah. Even without E3, it'll be fun. Hopefully, it's a little messy too.
Well, thank you both for sitting down and talking about our various histories with E3, and we'll see what June brings this year.
Thanks for having me.
Bye, guys.